Alcohol metabolism takes place in the liver, and it occurs through several key steps. These key steps are really hard to remember, but we're going to give you a super simple way to draw the entire pathway. And where better to talk about alcohol breakdown than at the neighborhood pub? Let's head on over for a drink. Will you just take a look at all this alcohol? My friend, ethanol is the starting place for any good adventure, and it's with ethanol that we'll start our mechanism today. That's right, the first intermediate in ethanol metabolism is, unsurprisingly, ethanol. You know, I actually started day drinking this morning. The real unsung hero of our time is the liver. I'll take 2 White Russians, one for me and one for my friend here. He needs a drink, he's been studying really hard. Yep, this bartender's an alcoholic. And he's also a 3-headed hydra, which for some odd reason reminds me of the word dehydrogenase. Putting it all together, this alcoholic hydra always makes me think of the enzyme alcohol dehydrogenase. Alcohol dehydrogenase converts alcohol into acetaldehyde. And if you think of the inside of this bar as the inside of a cell, you'll remember that alcohol dehydrogenase is located in the cytoplasm. Next, want to know how I remember acetaldehyde? I think of this saddle here on the other side of the bar. Easy now, we'll get to the mechanical bullet later. For now, just remember that our alcoholic hydra has put this saddle here to represent how alcohol dehydrogenase turns alcohol into acetaldehyde. Get it? Acetaldehyde? Service here is a bit slow today. That hydra's really lounging, even lighting a cigarette on the job. Wait, doesn't he know the health effects of nic acid? May just be a drunken thought of mine, but that cigarette reminds me of NAD+, or nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And see how he's adding energy to the cigarette by lighting it? You could even say that he's activating the NAD+ to its energy carrying form, NADH. A lit cigarette is our symbol for NADH, the reduced form of NAD+. Recall, NADH can be used to produce ATP via the electron transport chain. Anyway, just picture our alcoholic hydra lighting a cigarette, and you'll remember that alcohol dehydrogenase converts NAD+ to NADH. Put another way, this enzyme also generates some energy in the form of NADH when it metabolizes ethanol to acetaldehyde. Cheers. Now that we've touched on the smoking, can we talk about the foam? Must have come from the liquor packaging. The foam makes me think of fomepizole, a drug that blocks the action of alcohol dehydrogenase. Just like how our foam prevents our hydra from doing its job as a bartender, fomepizole inhibits alcohol dehydrogenase. Fomepizole is also used as an antidote for acute alcohol poisoning, as acetaldehyde, the next intermediate in this pathway, is toxic. Now before we move on, I want to throw in another quick note about fomepizole. When patients ingest ethylene glycol, aka antifreeze, or methanol, these compounds also get metabolized by alcohol dehydrogenase. Their metabolism causes the buildup of very toxic products. Like, I'm talking way more toxic than our acetaldehyde saddle. Since fomepizole inhibits alcohol dehydrogenase, it can be given to patients who ingest ethylene glycol and or methanol. It will prevent the formation of the super toxic metabolites and save the day. Now, this wasn't really related to the ethanol metabolism pathway, but I wanted to mention it because it's high yield. God, I hate that word. Now before we move on, I also want to point out those liquor pouring spouts. Back when I used to be a bartender, we used these spouts to pour alcohol out at a constant rate. Why is this constant rate so important? Well, the metabolism of ethanol by alcohol dehydrogenase also takes place at a constant rate. In other words, through zero-order kinetics. This is also the rate-limiting step in the pathway, so no matter how much alcohol you put into your body, your liver breaks it down at the same constant rate. This is why you get drunk if you drink a lot of alcohol. Your body can only break it down at a certain rate, so the ethanol backs up and makes you drunk. This drunken euphoria may then lead to poor choices, but hey, your mileage may vary. Alright, my friend, where were we? As Socrates, or someone like that, once said, there are multiple paths to every end. I guess I get pretty philosophical after a few drinks. What I'm really trying to say is that there are other ways to get to that acetaldehyde saddle. These alternative pathways are less important, but let's touch on them for completeness. Check out that guy's drink, a fishbowl with 2 eels. And see that straw? Makes me think of sipping. Sipping 2 eels sounds a lot like CYP2E1, doesn't it? CYP2E1 is a cytochrome P450 enzyme that metabolizes alcohol in the microsomes. To help us remember that CYP2E1 works in the microsome, just look at who ordered that drink. Oh, it's our microphone fiend, doing his karaoke again. Coincidentally, I also love to rock the microphone. In fact, you are lucky I didn't do this whole narration in song form. Now, this bar is full of vices, and our microphone man is also quite the smoker. But instead of cigarettes, he smokes pipes, because he thinks he's better than other people. See how he's put out his pipe to focus on singing? Dipped right into the drink. That's pretty aggressive. He must take his singing pretty seriously. Anyway, recall from our other adventures that NADP plus is symbolized by a pipe. The P is for pipe, didn't you know? Extinguishing a pipe seems like a metaphor for the conversion of NADPH, the energy-rich form, to NADP+, the energy-poor form. In fact, that's exactly what CYP2E1 does when it converts ethanol to acetaldehyde. Amazing. Lastly, notice the owner's pet cat, who's always around the bar. Looks like our microphone man's voice has given her quite the shock. She's even knocked over that bottle of peroxide, which I assume is there to clean up any bar fight wounds. Just kidding, I think it's there in case people get injured on the mechanical bull. On a more serious note, that cat reminds me of catalase, and the peroxide bottle should help you remember catalase's site of action, the peroxisome. Catalase works in the peroxisome to convert alcohol into, acetaldehyde. You can think of it as an alternative pathway. An alternate road. Diverged in a yellow wood? Alright, so there are 3 possibilities to get to acetaldehyde. But now for the moment you've been waiting for. Go on, buddy. Time to take that saddle out for a spin on the mechanical bull. Oh yeah, the thing also has 3 heads, kind of like a hydra. And what do you know? It's already been saddled up with our acetaldehyde saddle. This saddled hydra represents acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. Saddle for acetaldehyde, and hydra for dehydrogenase. Get it? And just like our bartender, our saddled rider is lighting a cigarette. Now for the interactive portion of the video. I want you to guess what this means. Yes, you are correct. Acetaldehyde dehydrogenase does indeed convert NAD+ to the energy-carrying NADH. Good job. On a related note, I never understood why the owners put a light on top of the ride there. Seems like a health hazard. What if you bump your head? This light is here to help you remember that acetaldehyde dehydrogenase works in the mitochondria. You know, a light because the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Oh yeah, yeehaw. Whoa, it looks like one of our cantina employees has collided with the saddled hydra. Come on, man, how long have you been working here? Amateur move. Now, I want you to focus on the satay that our poor waiter has thrown into the air. Now, I don't know why, but the word satay reminds me of the word acetate. Acetate, or the acetate satay. Acetate just so happens to be the final product of alcohol breakdown, and it can be eliminated in the urine. Just like how acetate closes this pathway, I always end a good night of drinking with a plate of satay. But wait, there's more. Take a look at the writer again. It's a RAM. RAM for disulfiram, the drug that inhibits the action of acetaldehyde dehydrogenase. As you can imagine, disulfiram blocks the breakdown of acetaldehyde, causing it to accumulate. Whenever a patient on disulfiram drinks alcohol, they build up tons of acetaldehyde. Remember when I told you that acetaldehyde was toxic? That's right. Acetaldehyde is a major cause of nasty hangover symptoms, so disulfiram causes instant hangovers whenever patients drink. This is supposed to discourage drinking in alcoholics. Yeah, I know I should drink less. You know, everyone always says that, but almost nobody actually tells you why. You know what the amazing thing is? You can boil the harmful effects of drinking back down to biochemistry. Remember how alcohol is primarily broken down by alcohol dehydrogenase and aldehyde dehydrogenase? Also remember how these 2 enzymes also generate NADH? That's 2 lit cigarettes for every molecule of alcohol. Well, in the liver, this causes an increase in the ratio of NADH to NAD+. Alright, I can tell what you're thinking, David. Tell me something I don't already know. Well, for starters, the ratio of NADH to NAD+ matters because NAD+ is a key cofactor in several other reactions. Let's talk about this in the context of downstream clinical findings. First, take a look at these jugs of milk in the fridge. They sure make a lot of white Russians here. This accumulation of milk, a recurring symbol for lactate, should remind you of lactic acidosis. Recall, lactate dehydrogenase uses NADH when it converts pyruvate to lactate, which is the mechanism by which some cells regenerate NAD+ after glycolysis. Thing is, a big increase in NADH causes this reaction to shift right, producing more lactate. This buildup can lead to lactic acidosis, a potential clinical presentation in alcohol abuse. You can remember this as the accumulation of milk in this fridge. Next, take a look at this empty sugar canister on the counter. The waitstaff has been too busy spilling satay everywhere and forgot to refill the sugar. This low sugar here reminds me of fasting hypoglycemia. To understand why this happens, recall that a high NADH to NAD plus ratio favors the production of malate from oxaloacetate. Since oxaloacetate is used for gluconeogenesis, this shift towards malate blocks gluconeogenesis. So, whenever patients are fasting, they can't use gluconeogenesis to make sugar. Just remember the low sugar here for fasting hypoglycemia. Afterwards, take a look at this plate of foie gras on the counter. This is a pretty upscale establishment, let me tell you. By the way, foie gras is a French dish made of fatty liver, which is exactly what this symbol represents, hepatosteatosis or fatty change in the liver. A high ratio of NADH to NAD+ increases the production of glycerol 3-phosphate from dihydroxyacetone phosphate, or DHAP. And for chemistry buffs, you may recall how glycerol forms the backbone of fatty triglycerides. Therefore, this shift favors hepatosteatosis. Ever hear of alcoholic fatty liver disease? Now you know why it happens. Just remember our plate of foie gras and you'll be all set. Lastly, take a look at those cans of ketone in the fridge being chilled with the milk. Only the king of beverages is served here at our bar, and these ketone cans help me remember the formation of ketone bodies, or ketogenesis. Why does this happen? Well, recall how the Krebs cycle makes NADH? An increased NADH to NAD+ ratio inhibits the Krebs cycle and causes the hepatocyte to use acetyl-CoA for other things, namely making ketone bodies and lipids. The accumulation of ketone bodies can cause ketoacidosis, and the formation of lipids contributes to hepatosteatosis. Gotta love a cool can of ketone. And that's it for alcohol metabolism. Woo, we're done, we did it, let's recap. Alcohol can be metabolized to acetaldehyde in 3 different ways. The first and most important way is through alcohol dehydrogenase in the cytoplasm, which is blocked by the drug fomepizole. Alcohol dehydrogenase operates via zero-order kinetics, which means that it happens at a constant rate regardless of how much alcohol you drink. Less important paths include CYP2E1 in the microsome or catalase in the peroxisome. The acetaldehyde is then metabolized into acetate through the actions of aldehyde dehydrogenase. The drug disulfiram is given to discourage drinking, as it blocks aldehyde dehydrogenase and leads to the buildup of the toxic intermediate acetaldehyde. Finally, the metabolism of alcohol usually generates 2 molecules of NADH from NAD+, which increases the NADH to NAD+ ratio. The increase in this ratio leads to a number of clinical findings, such as lactic acidosis, fasting hypoglycemia, hepatosteatosis, and ketogenesis. Phew, I'm definitely feeling the alcohol now. How are you still sober? Hey, bartender, another round for my friend here.